Welcome to my channel. This is today's episode of Daily News Clips. But before we get into that, I have to thank you for coming to my channel from all over the world and watching my videos and coming back repeatedly and making my channel what it is today. It wouldn't be the channel it is without you. So thank you. I just have 3 items in the news today. The first one, the title is Audience Shocked by Megyn Kelly's Expletive-Filled Tirade over this issue. It's a YouTube video, and I'll put the link in the description so you can watch it for yourself. But she gets upset about someone promoting trans athletes and males who claim to be females injuring female athletes in female sports. I don't know. I don't understand how we got to this point. I don't understand how anybody could think it's a good idea for a man, whether he claims to be a woman or not, to play in women's sports. Their bodies are not built the same, and women will be injured by men. And we already know that because it's happened numerous times. But that's the crazy world we live in, where people think that's okay. The second article I have is called Uncensored, Reverend Munther Isaac. It's an interview with Tucker Carlson. I'm not going to play it. You can watch it if you want to. But basically, Tucker interviews this minister who is a minister in Gaza. And he talks about how the war affects the Christians in Gaza and about how the war in Iraq affected the Christians in Iraq. Over 80% of them are gone now, either dead or moved away. And he talks about how his parishioners don't have medicine, so when they get sick, they can't fight the illness and they die. And they're starving to death because they don't have food. It's a terrible situation. And the thing is, I didn't even think there were Christians in Gaza. I didn't think the people in Gaza would allow Christians to exist there, but apparently there are some, just a handful, like 80 to 100. But still, I had no idea they existed. So it's an interesting interview. I think you might enjoy watching it. And then finally, I have an article titled Sage Brooks, Why I No Longer Feel Like a Victim. This is a Prager video, and I thought you might enjoy watching this, so I'm going to bring it up.
I make money in psychology, and I was like, why? And he was like, because you're black. White people are not going to pay to see a black psychologist, and my world shattered. My name is Sage Brooks, and this is my story. I grew up in Southern California with 5 other siblings. My parents were always fighting. Arguments and domestic violence was common. The strongest memory I have of my mom growing up was her crying. She would be crying all the time. I remember we were at a family gathering, and my mom and my dad got into a physical altercation with one another, and the police were called. My siblings and I were taken away from my parents, and I became a ward of the state at 5 years old. Me and my 3 sisters were placed into a foster home, and my brothers were placed into a different foster home, so we were essentially separated. Every weekend, my grandmother would come and pick us up and take us to her house, and then she'd have to drop us back off. She was a Jehovah's Witness and a very strict woman. My grandmother did her best to make sure that we felt like a family and we were like a family, and eventually my grandmother got custody of us, and we were back together again with my siblings. It was always a full house. It was always a lot of noise, and we got along relatively well. We all had our own different personality traits. For example, I loved to read. I read a lot of books on psychology and how to deal with things, and that cleared the way for me to understand what I do want in life. High school was a little tumultuous for me. I started to ask more questions about my family, and that is when I started to look at my parents with more resentment. I just felt like a very angry person. My grandmother tried to put me in therapy, and that didn't really work because I refused to talk to the therapist. I was just holding everything inside, and I had a really bad attitude problem. A lot of my anger stemmed from not having, like, anybody I felt that I could talk to. Basketball was definitely an outlet for me when it came to just expressing emotions and releasing some of that anger. My relationship with my basketball coach helped me a lot. I remember she asked me what college I was going to, and I was like, I'm not going to college. She changed my mind about that really fast. I went to college not knowing what to expect. It was an entirely different world for me. I wanted to be a psychologist, and my counselor, who was a black man, he told me, like, you're not gonna make money in psychology. And I was like, why? And he was like, because you're black. White people are not gonna pay to see a black psychologist. And my world shattered because I was always so fascinated with psychology. And here I am being told that one of my biggest dreams is just not gonna happen because I'm black. I started to learn about my oppression. I started to learn about how much of a plight we have in America as black people. The main thing I took away from college was that I was a victim and that I was oppressed and that there was white privilege and a system of white supremacy that is definitely something that's gonna have its foot on my neck for my entire life. It got to the point where if I would be in a room full of white people, I would be uncomfortable. Like, that's the mentality that I had. After all this time with leftist professors and students, I started leaning into the progressive ideals. I decided I wanted to be active and as a student. And so we were marching around the school with megaphones, and we sit in the bookstore and we yell at the top of our lungs, and we basically block people from getting, like, books. And so I'm sitting there and I'm looking around and I realize, like, what am I doing? Like, what is this accomplishing here? I felt like it was more disruptive as opposed to achieving any specific goal. And so I stopped going to those events. I stopped marching, and I was like, this is not accomplishing anything. So I started to question just my sense of relationship or identity with the left. My best friend, she had kept trying to get me to watch these conservative videos. And at some point I gave in and gave one a watch. At the time, I didn't know it was a PragerU video, but I went on watching more and more of their episodes. And then I started to learn more about the government and how the government operates. And I was just more and more intrigued about politics. I ended up going to Washington, D.C. with Blexit to a pro-American rally, and everything they said resonated with me. So here I am on the lawn of the White House listening to Donald Trump, and I'm sitting here watching people of all colors coming together to celebrate family values. That is when I became a patriot. Growing up, my grandmother did her best to make sure that we felt like a family and we were like a family, but we didn't have a dad. We didn't have even a male role model to look to. So as you can imagine, it affected our lives. But my brothers, I feel, had it the worst because they didn't have anybody around to teach them how to be a man or how to grow into one. My brother looked to people in the neighborhood for a father-like figure or any type of guidance. And unfortunately, that led him to get involved in gangs. My other brother, when he was 16, he decided to smoke marijuana for the first time. But he didn't know that the marijuana was laced with PCP. I got a call saying that my brother was running down the street in his boxers and barefoot, and he tried to run through a window. He always was a kind-hearted person, very smart, very funny, but there was something different in my brother the very first time I saw him after he got out of the hospital. It was like he was dead inside. It's just a part of his brain that just was never the same. And I'll never forget when I got the call from the police that my brother had been killed. He had been hit by a big truck. Blunt force trauma. I really believe that had my brother not smoked, he'd probably still be alive today. And then 7 months later, my sister, who struggled with drug and alcohol abuse, passed away. Not having a mom and a dad took a really big toll, and is the reason I feel that I have 2 siblings who've passed on. My entire life, out of all the 10 commandments, the one that I had the most difficulty with was honor thy mother and thy father. It was only 6 years into her 12-year sentence that I started to really forgive my mom for not being there for us. That was the one decision I feel that changed the course of my life. The main reason that I went on a different direction in life than my siblings is because they blamed my parents for their life circumstances, even well into adulthood. You really do give your power away when you have a victim mentality. Being a victim means whatever's happening to you, it's not your fault. And so that gives you a disposition where you're not motivated. you're not inspired. You don't feel the power to change your life. So when I was anti-American, I was also victim-minded and also looking for ways in which I'm oppressed. As my patriotism went up, my self-responsibility went up, life just felt so much better once I started to recognize what a great country we live in and how much opportunity there really is. And so it's like, if I don't take advantage of that opportunity, that's on me. A lot of people are born into unfortunate situations and they feel like the cards are stacked against them. There's nothing they can do. It's kind of like a cycle that continues until we have the self-awareness to realize that we have the power to change it. Thank you for watching this video. To keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.
This NCAA official looks above.
That's quite a story, isn't it? It's astounding the amount of damage that is done to children when their parents are not competent and not raising them properly. And she had 5 siblings, and 2 of them are dead at young ages because of the horrendous childhood that they had. It's sad. It's really sad. And then she was taught to be a victim until she finally figured out that that wasn't doing her any good. An interesting story. Well, I pray for you, my viewers, that you will have an abundant life, excuse me, and that you will live a long time and that you'll be healthy, and that God will keep you safe from harm. I pray that God will do all those things for the people that you love. And I pray most of all that you will be anxious for nothing, but in all things, through prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, you'll make your requests known to God. And the peace that passes all understanding will keep your heart and mind in Christ Jesus. This is the Vietnam Era Vet, out.